Are you ready to be a deliberate millionaire? What?
Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Dupree, scouring the globe to bring you stories of courage, passion, and resilience. If I could sum up this podcast into one word, I would use empathy. Now let's get inspired.
Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I am your host once again, Brett Dupree, here to drop some spiritual knowledge on you. Today we're talking to a prosperity miniature, Rosemary Nonny. What a cool name that is. But first I talk about what's going on in my life, because if I cannot be vulnerable, how can I expect my guests to be? I am doing this on August 6th, 2020, because yesterday was the 5th, which is the Wednesday that I wanted to put this out, but I've gotten kind of behind on doing this, and the thought of doing this is starting to drag on me again. I'll probably take a time off around my birthday, but sheesh, just the slog. I mean, the part of it, of course, is going through a global pandemic. You know, I find it funny that I'm going to be complaining at the beginning of a very positive interview that I'm sure you're very much like, but I am here to be honest about me. I remember when I first started this podcast, I wanted this part to be kind of a road to glory, if you will. But it turns out to be more just spinning my plates every week, talking about how I'm spinning my plates every week. Other than the Lightworker Toastmasters, which was probably fun to listen to the beginning, I was doing things. And now that I am out of Toastmasters, not out of Toastmasters altogether, but out of Toastmasters district leadership, I'm taking a step back. And just dealing with this global pandemic has just been hard on me. I miss hugs. I miss going out. I miss going to my Toastmasters meetings. I miss seeing people. I miss the smiles at the office. And I'm just getting to the point where I'm honestly sick of it. I'm sick of being in a global pandemic. I hate it. 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 Now, I'm not sick of it in a way where I'm going to lash out to everyone not wear a mask, believe that there's some global cabal conspiracy to use vaccines to put microchips in my body, from my microchip phone that knows exactly what I'm doing, to the point where if I think of something for some reason, it will appear on my phone. I mean, heck, once I hurt my shoulder, it hurts, and I don't remember saying it out loud, and I was scrolling through Facebook, and all of a sudden there was a ad for a sling. I have never, just like, sheesh, cray. What are the odds of that? But anyway, as I digress, I don't want to turn this into a just complaint fest, but that's the way I feel. Doing this podcast feels like a slog. I'm 2 interviews away from having enough to do my 100, and I don't know if I want to continue after that, mostly because my numbers are not as high as I would like to. They were getting higher, they're increasing, but all of a sudden, bam, something hit, and all of a sudden my numbers aren't where I would like them to be, and they weren't like getting super high to the point where I'm like, I can start advertising. It's still, I mean, yes, I'm not doing this for the numbers, and you never know even if only 10 people listen, if that one person gets what they want out of it. I totally agree with that, but at the same time, I would like to think that all my hard work means something, that I'm doing a lot of work. I'm editing, I'm recording this part, I'm started putting transcripts out with the hope that that would increase listenership somehow, and that has not. And I want to be professional. I want to look good. I want to do this. This one guy even emailed me to be a person on another podcast. And so I checked it out, and the podcast was like, we only accept people making 6 figures a year. I'm like, wow. I would be happy if my business wasn't costing me 5 figures a year. 4 figures a year. You know, if I was just breaking even at this point, I would be happy-ish. I wouldn't be happy, but I would at least be not feeling like throwing my money down the toilet. But it doesn't really feel that way because I do enjoy doing it. For instance, just listening to Rosemary's as I was editing was inspiring. But still, I would have to lie to say this isn't weighing on me, that just pushing forward and believing that I want to do something more than what I'm doing. And I almost miss seeking, I was thinking yesterday. I used to be such a big spiritual seeker, looking out for everything and believing all that stuff. And just at one point, I just started looking at it and noticing the pattern and noticing how a lot of it's the same, just packaged differently. And that I don't really need to look at so much, just find the ones that work for me, which I think is important. But it's just going out and reading everything just didn't seem like something that made sense. And I just wasn't excited about that. And once I stopped doing that, I just felt like I lost my mojo. I know my uncle's death probably had something to do with it, but that was like 6 years ago? 8 years ago now? I don't know. Time is bendable. I always feel like this is going to be the thing that gets me out of it. This is going to be the thing that gets me out of it. This is going to be the thing that gets me out of it. And so far it hasn't been. But I'm going to continue looking. I'm going to continue chugging along. Life is just one big disappointment after another until you wish Flanders is dead. I know it's just a Simpsons joke. But I didn't really want to turn this into a complaint fest, but I guess that's just where I am right now. Sometimes in life you just gotta complain. Not everything's going to be going your way all the time. And yes, there is a power to being positive, but not being honest with yourself. And you end up covering that darkness, that sadness, that things that aren't going on with your life with a veneer, a paint of positivity. And you don't want to paint your life positivity if you want to think and be positive. You want to be genuine. You want to be who you are and feel how you feel at that time, and continue to move forward though. Continue to work on your mindset so you are positive more than normal, but always be authentic to who you are. And I believe that's important. I'm just not in a great place today. That happens. Tomorrow, hopefully I'll be in a better place. Hopefully I'll be seeing my girlfriend in a couple weeks. I'm looking forward to that, plus about a jiggly cheesecake, so I'm super excited about eating a jiggly cheesecake. I've always wanted to, and I'm getting one made fresh just for me, and I'm super excited and happy, and I can't wait. Yay! Jiggly cheesecake. And you know what makes me as happy as a jiggly cheesecake? The person I am interviewing today, Rosemary Nonny Knight. Rosemary Nonny Knight used to be a pharmacist, slowly feeling her life force drain away as she did work that did not make her feel fulfilled. Finally, she stepped up after hitting rock bottom of bankruptcy in a 4-year-long depression, as well as giving birth to 3 glorious princesses. She chose to start a real estate business to make it successful instead of all the dabbling she has done in the past. It works, and it still works. She has replaced her income and quit pharmacy in 2013. And then she had a deeper awakening when she realized her whole life is spent making everyone happy and trying to find worth in others' approval. And now she's back in touch with her true self. She is the creator of the Abundance Library, an ever-expanding catalog of business, spiritual, and personal growth digital programs designed to empower spiritual people to live behind the pain and limiting beliefs of the past as they rise victoriously in their true design life. Now here is my interview with Rosemary Nonny Knight. Hello, Rosemary, and welcome to my podcast.
Hi, Brett. How you doing? Lovely to speak with you.
Lovely to speak to you. Apparently you're all the way in jolly old England?
Oh, yes. Lovely sunny England as of today, anyway. Who knows when anyone listens to this, it may not be sunny anymore, but for today, it is sunny.
Why don't you give the listeners, that's where I forget. Yeah. Listeners, a brief introduction to you.
Okay, well, I'm Rosemary Nonny Knight. I was a pharmacist once upon a time. I started off in the UK, went back to Nigeria. There's a whole lot of backstory around that and all the overcoming of who knows what to get to the UK finally. Coming back to the UK, doing my university, thinking that becoming a pharmacist would be the answer to everything, except it wasn't. As most people tend to find out, you get to a certain point in life and realize that all the goals you potentially thought would lead to success led to a form of success, just not very satisfying success. And so I suppose that became my story. I got to a place where I thought everything was going to be amazing. I'd worked so hard to get here, followed everybody else's definition of success for myself, and got to this success. And I still remember sitting down, having graduated, thinking to myself, is this it? Is this really my life now? I'm going to be a pharmacist for the rest of my life, a job I don't even really like. But I guess I'm an adult now. This is what we do. You do whatever to get by. And so I did for a season until bankruptcy and depression kind of hit me over the head. And 3 amazing princesses who I decided that I have to show them a different way. And so as a result of hitting what I would call almost rock bottom, I finally, after 4 years, finally decided it's time to do something different. Instead of just thinking about it, figure out how I'm going to actually make it work. I'm not sure how much detail you're wanting at this point, but ultimately, the long and short of that story was that I, after a few wrong turns as I continued to follow other people's definitions of success, I finally found my own way, what I would call my true design path. And that is where I'm at right now, discovering more of the divine, which became, the divine has always been a very important part of my life anyway. However, in going through this journey, it became an even more important part. And I realized that really every good thing flows out of connection with the divine. And going on from there to just doing the things that I actually wanted to do. Things that really, if I just followed my heart from the very beginning, I would have been doing so much sooner. But we tell ourselves stories. And I suppose that's part of the work that I do with people, is the stories. The stories we tell ourselves that keep us away from actually just living fulfilled lives. But anyway, the long and short of me is that I found my path. Now you're going to have to question more if you want more detail in between there. But but that's the short and long of, the short story of Rosemary Nonny Knight. And I suppose we're here to talk a little bit about that, plus whatever you want to go with it.
So I'm curious about your time as a pharmacist. What got you wanting to go to be a pharmacist, and what about that wasn't satisfying?
What made me be a pharmacist? My parents, ultimately. And also, I suppose, it was my parents mostly, but then the fact that I was born in the UK. I stayed in the UK until I was about 5 when my parents decided to return to Nigeria. And in Nigeria, it's very different from the UK or the US. It's a third world country. I think it's still considered a third world country, or might be an emerging nation right now. And poverty is, oh my gosh, it's a whole new level of poverty. So in going back to Nigeria and realizing that the only way it felt like the only way to succeed was to do what you were told, really. My parents thought, they were first generation coming out of almost like a village, ultimately. And the village is not a nice, lovely little village town in England or something. Village is like a village, mud huts and such. But they had somehow had the good fortune, my father particularly, to come over to the UK and got an education and all of that. So they really felt that education was important, and heading towards some kind of professional career was the key to success. And in some ways it was okay. Being a pharmacist was okay. It just wasn't me. And I suppose out of my siblings, there was 4 of us, we could either be a doctor, a pharmacist, an accountant, or potentially a lawyer. They did get the doctor, the pharmacist, the accountant, and then the one child went random and did computer science, which was like, oh my gosh, how could you do computer stuff? But we all know now that computer stuff is pretty good. But at the time, it was quite new to my parents, so it took a heck of a lot of convincing to allow one of my brothers to go into computer stuff. In terms of pharmacy, I went into it because it felt like a safe thing to do. Who cared about fulfilling? Who cared about happy? You just needed to be safe. You needed to be able to pay your bills. You needed to be able to get by in life. And I bought into that for a very long time. And in fact, prided myself on my practicality. I can forget about what I feel. Just do what you gotta do, man, to get by. And so I did. And for a while I did. And I probably would have carried on for the rest of my life, if not for the fact that I suppose there's always been a longing in my heart for something different. And I was dabbling at business and all of that kind of thing because I really wanted to do my own thing for a while. And so I did. And I dabbled, but I kept coming back to, anytime it got a little bit hard, I would say, hey, at least I'm a pharmacist. Who cares? Let's just go back to doing what we do the pharmacist thing. Because I hadn't learned boundaries. I hadn't learned to say no. I kept trying to get people's approval by saying yes to things that I really didn't need to be saying yes to, particularly around the area of money. I wasn't wise at all. I was blessed to be a blessing, and I was just distributing the thing any old how, basically. Until, yes, the debt took over, and I was pregnant with my first child and realized, I don't know how I'm going to sustain all of this. I had thought that I would give birth to my child and give her to some kind of childcare, somebody at 6 weeks old, and go back to work, working all the hours I got sent, as I was doing 50, 60 hours, trying to keep my head above water in terms of the debt and all of that, trying to be a blessing to other people, taking them, because always I wanted to empower young people, particularly when I was younger. And so I was trying to take them to conferences and paying for them to do this, that, and the other. I had people living with me, all of this stuff, trying to live out what I considered to be my calling, whilst at the same time maintaining a practical, responsible life. However, when I got pregnant, I just couldn't foresee giving away my child at 6 weeks to anyone. And so I was like, what am I going to do? I have all of this debt, another tax bill coming to hit me over the head, basically, and no money. And the only solution I could see at that point was bankruptcy. I came out of the bankruptcy court feeling horrible. It felt like utter failure. It was not what I envisioned for my life. I woke up the next morning, 7 months pregnant, a few days before Christmas, dead inside, ultimately. I literally felt as if I called that period of time, it was about 4 years or so, the blank, because I literally felt blank inside. I now see that I was pretty dang depressed at that point, and I felt like an utter failure. I gave up all ideas of dreams and visions and all of that stuff. I felt that kind of good stuff happens to other people. It does not happen to people like me. Gave away all my personal development books, spiritual development books. Whatever. All of these people with your stupid testimonies. It doesn't happen to people like me. I'm just going to stick with being a pharmacist for the rest of my life and figure out I don't know how to make it work. But being pregnant with my first daughter and then giving birth to her, I realized I want to home educate. I don't want to be working 50, 60 hours trying to, just live. My husband and I decided we wanted a different way. And so at this point, and this was after giving birth to my third child, I finally started to wake up properly. Because for that whole period of time, I really was just kind of going through the motions and trying to be the best mother I could be and wife and trying to pretend I didn't feel so dead inside, but I really did. And then when I gave birth to my third child, 6 weeks later, I realized I'm still broke. I'm still going to have to go back to work unless I find some other way to do things. Nothing has changed. Just because I buried my head in the sand for the last 4 years didn't actually change anything. And there was some other random drama around my extended family where they're insulting me. The truth is I hid the fact that I'd gone bankrupt from them. So they didn't know that I just didn't have no money. And they continued to ask for money that I couldn't give them. And this time they started insulting me. And this time I was just like the final straw. I have to do something different. This is not me. This is not who I am. This is not the life that I'm supposed to be living. Just enough of this. And so at this point, I really got serious about what am I going to do? I do not want to return to pharmacy full time forever and ever and ever and put the girls in some kind of childcare. And I don't want them to grow up thinking that their only choices are grow a family or be at work. In fact, I even had a client today saying exactly that it's like either I'm looking after my children or I'm working all the hours God sends to make money. I just didn't want my girls, because they're all 3 girls as well, to feel that that's their only option. And how could I tell them there's another option if I didn't have the courage to figure out what the options were for me? And so at this point, I got serious about what am I going to do? Yeah, pharmacy is great and it can be convenient, but I hate it. I hate the fact that I have to wake up and do that every freaking morning. I hate the fact that I have to do it and give my children away in order to do it. I just hate it. I hate being at the beck and call of money. Seriously, this cannot be life. What am I going to do? Bearing in mind that I'd gone bankrupt. I felt really stupid around money. It felt stupid to even be thinking like this, but I knew I had to do something different. And so I suppose the pharmacy, how did I get into pharmacy? My parents, my looking around the world and thinking, well, it's a hostile place. I better find something to do that is acceptable-ish and that makes good money. Really, that's how I got into pharmacy. There were parts of it I liked. I'm not going to say it was all terrible. There were parts of it that I like where they're talking to actual people and trying to help them get off their drugs, if I could. And those parts I still do. Well, I don't help people get off drugs, but I do speak to people. And that's the part I really liked. I just like people. I like actually communicating with people, but that was not the main part of the job at all. So pharmacy, I could have carried on forever, but thankfully, I'm actually quite thankful for bankruptcy right now. But because if not for that, I might have just carried on in some stupid, unawakened way, doing pharmacy for the rest of my life, telling myself some stupid story of there is no choice. There's always a choice. And that's definitely something I discovered in my journey. There's always a choice. The choice might seem scary, but there's always a choice. Are you willing to take the choice or the chance of living for yourself, living a happy life, getting free, fulfilled, financially abundant, and love-drenched? That's what I decided on finally. It was, okay, enough with the pharmacy. There has to be another way. And it felt stupid and crazy at the time and quite scary. But I started very gently making my way across I've started looking around, what do I want to do? What can I do around my kids? And it was at that point I looked into property, which is real estate, you guys call it. And they was telling me about no money down. I figured, well, I have no money. So let's go see what they're talking about. And so then I started on a whole different journey. At that point, with the no money down thing, I decided to start networking and seeing what that was about. So there was a guy, I'd been following his emails because I'd read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, like a lot of people probably have, at some point before I packed in the whole concept of personal development and all of that, and success on your own terms. I'd read that, and somewhere had lodged into my brain this whole concept of property. But I just thought it was something I would do when I was later on in life, when I had saved up money from being a pharmacist. But after all of this happened, I realized, well, these people are talking about different strategies I could potentially do now. And so at that point, I was like 2 stone overweight, which I think for you guys is about 28 pounds or something. I felt like a frumpy mummy, ultimately. I felt really terrible walking into this room. And in fact, I had some people just kind of go low and look over me as if I was non-existent. But I thought, whatever, let's go in here, figure out if there's something that they can help me with. I was on this person's list for 6 years. He'd somehow come through the whole property crash and real estate crash and all of that stuff in 2007, 8, or whenever it was. And he was still going. So I went to his thing. I started listening to him some more, and then decided to mentor with him, because I figured, well, I'd done God knows how many years training to be a pharmacist, and I dabbled at starting business and thought that I could figure it out on my own, and I hadn't. So maybe this time, as I was serious about it this time, let's get some help. So I did. I paid out a heck of a lot of money. I did not have to work with him. My husband was slightly petrified, but I was committed. I knew I had to make this work. I would look at my daughters and think, yeah, this is working. I don't care how, but these princesses are going to figure out that there's a different way. They're going to see their mother showing them a different way. I invested the 10,000 pounds that I really, really, really did not have at that point, but I figured I would make it back somehow. And I did. In that year of mentoring with him, I just really did whatever the guy said. I'd be petrified. I'd be shouting to myself in the car, "She who dares wins! She who dares wins!" And so there I am, daring to do the things that I never thought I could do. And the thing that people will find as they start doing things that scare them a little bit, or as they start following, because I suppose for me, as I said earlier, the spiritual connection thing has always been quite important to me, though I'd hidden it somewhat from it. But definitely as I started in business, it became even more important to me. And so there was this feeling of, as I start to do things that scare me a little bit, but they seem to be going in the direction of my actual calling, or the thing that I actually want to do, that doors that I never would have expected just kind of opened. So things that I never thought would happen happened, but only because I was on the path. And so there was almost this sense of being taken care of. It didn't still fill me with complete confidence at that point, but I just remember feeling, there's just these things happening, and it seems to all be coming together. Thank you, God. There's still times of, oh my God, is any of this even working? What am I doing? Am I crazy? How dare I think that I can do this? For goodness sake, I even told my mom I wanted to start in business, and she was laughing at me thinking, you're just not a business kind of woman. So how could I think that I could do this? And there was all of that stuff going on that goes on in one's mind when one tries to do something outside of their experience. But I carried on anyway, did whatever this dude said to do. And by the end of the year, I did win this Porsche Boxster for being Property Businesswoman of the Year. My husband was absolutely amazed by this Porsche Boxster, because it was a Porsche Boxster, basically. I was just like, oh my gosh. There was this hope inside of me again that said, actually, Rosemary, when you commit, when you really get your mind in gear and really follow through on what you say you want to do, you actually do make things work. So it was the stirrings of my confidence returning to me again. This feeling of, I can do this stuff. And so, yeah, I did make the money back in equity in terms of the house in that first year, and also won this Porsche Boxster, which then later on, a few months later, we decided to sell on and buy another property with. So that was really cool. And then also, within 6 months of that course completing, I went on to work with a different coach, but I also managed to find a strategy that worked for me, that I was able to really run with. And again, it was another divine kind of connection. Just, okay, I'm scared of doing this. Let me just try and see what I can do here. As I was doing that, doors just started opening, houses appeared, all of this stuff that just would not have happened if I hadn't just tried. And within 6 months, ultimately, I was more than making my pharmacist salary. So that was 18 months from starting. And then my coach there at that point said, hey, Rosemary, you realize that you covered your monthly salary. You could just stop. Ooh, I can. So at that point, I did. It took me another year before I had the courage to actually hand in my resignation to the whole pharmacy board, that I was not going to practice ever again. But at least I stopped work and carried on doing the property side of things. But in the doing of the property side of things, I recognized also that it was a bit of a sideways step. I'd done pharmacy because it was a practical thing. Well, it was obviously everybody knew that pharmacists, they make enough money, they all that stuff. So that was practical. It was success on other people's terms. Great. And when I moved into business, also the whole property real estate thing in some ways was a sideways step. It wasn't the desire of my heart. The desire of my heart, or one of the desires of my heart, was to be my own business. So in some ways it fulfilled that. But being in property, that wasn't really what I wanted to do, but it felt more practical than the whole concept of coaching. Because as I mentioned earlier, I really wanted to empower. I started by empowering young people, but I'd always seen myself as, at some point when I was about 71, after retirement, I would empower a heck of a lot of more people, and that would become my life, or some kind of ministry, churchy thing. I always thought maybe it was going to be in church or something along those lines. But working with this other coach, he said, what do you really want to do? Because it seems this property thing isn't actually what you want to do. It's just what you're doing because it seems sensible. And it was. And I could have carried on, just the same as I could have carried on with pharmacy. But it wasn't the thing I really wanted to do. So I said, well, I would really kind of like to be a coach, I think. Because I'd read about coaching, again, prior to the whole bankruptcy and all of that. And again, it was one of those books that I put to the side thinking, yeah, right, like that could happen for me, basically in the blank period. But then I came back to it and thinking, actually, I really do want to do something like this where I'm empowering other people and supporting them in moving forward, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the stuff I had been doing at church anyway, but could I do it in the actual world? Does it work? Really? But then I was working with a coach, so obviously it worked. and also because I'd done this whole win the Porsche and all of that, people started asking if I could help them with their businesses, help them get off the ground with the strategy that I had used. And so this coach encouraged me to just, try, do that, do what you actually want to do. So I started transitioning again to something more my heart. Again, I was more practical because I'm still a very practical person. So again, I was like, I'm going to go down the road of just business coach, just talk tips, tricks, and strategies. But again, I did that, made that successful, but I knew that there was more. And also working with people, is the recognition that sometimes it's not the fact that you don't know the tips or the tricks or the strategies that stop you from winning. It's that you can't get past the nonsense in your head telling you that you can't win. You can't seem to get past the childhood craziness, which most of us don't want to look at because it just seems stupid. We just need to supposed to be practical and just get on with life. But because I had to deal with some of my crazy stuff, and in fact, I'd had a very potent example in my life where I had worked with this coach on a forgiveness day, for goodness sake, which was never something I would ever have imagined doing with anybody apart from my pastor or something, basically. But I'd done this day where I'd actually gone through and forgiven extended family and all of this stuff. And within 3 months to the day of that, because I'd been stagnant in my business, which is why I'd considered it, because I'd been trying hard. I'd been doing everything, doing all the practical stuff, and I couldn't seem to get my business to keep moving forward. I said, okay, let's try this. Because he'd mentioned, there's stuff in your head that maybe you want to clear. It was only because I'd hit the ceiling in my income in terms of my business that I considered it, because I wouldn't normally have considered something so soft and woo. Even though I was a spiritual person, it just didn't seem to be connected. But I did this forgiveness day, and within 3 months of that, my income had doubled without me doing anything different. I suddenly realized, actually, it is important. This stuff matters. I saw it in clients time and time again that it wasn't that they didn't know what to do. It's that for whatever reason, they couldn't do it. And it was always some kind of weird reason inside of their head. They couldn't do it consistently. They just couldn't picture themselves living the life that they wanted to live. There was just all kinds of reasons inside of them that said, it's just impossible. I'm going to be scammed. People like you don't get to live that way. And all the stuff that I had gone through, all the stuff that I'd had to handle in order to keep moving forward, I suddenly realized that there was a need not just to talk about tips, tricks, and strategies. Yes, we have to do the practical stuff. But the practical stuff alone will never get us the true success that we want, the freedom we want, the happiness we want, the fulfillment we want. It can get you some money, but that's it. And if I just wanted money, I may as well have just stayed being a pharmacist. I didn't just want money. I wanted a life that I enjoyed, a free life where I got to do what I wanted to do with people I wanted to do it for, whenever I wanted to do it. And that's what a lot of people wanted as well. So I could teach them the tips, tricks, and strategies. A lot of people couldn't even do that because there was just all of this stuff going on inside of them. Even when they did do it, they got some money, but it wasn't what they were looking for. And so I went from being just a business coach to what I call the prosperity minister. It's about prosperity in all areas of life because that's what I wanted. That's what I had achieved with my life, where I'd got to the place where I was doing only things that I wanted to do, and still being able to live, trusting my connection with the divine, knowing that that was my true source, never the work of my hand. Yes, it was fun to do, and it is fun to create the things that I create now, to work with the people that I work now, but I don't do it for the money. The money comes anyway, basically. I do it because I love it. I do it because I want to. And it's not just from the work area of my life. It's like even the relationships in my life. I have relationships that I want. If a relationship is feeling draining or yucky, and the other person is not willing to, do the work to elevate it, then I am free to move away from that. I no longer do anything to get somebody's love or to get somebody's affection or approval. I'm free from that because I know my source. I know what is true. I know my true foundation, and it continues to get better and better. I continue to expand and expand. I'm freer and freer, and that's what people want. A lot of people get to the point where it's like they're hitting their head against ceilings that they can't seem to break through. It's not that they're not willing to work. It's not enough to work. That's the thing. It's not enough to just do the physical stuff. It's all the stuff we sometimes try to avoid. And that's what I learned. And that's what I teach. And that's what that's what my life has become about. Is showing that there is a different way to live. And so I suppose that's how I came to being who I am here. But there was a lot of stuff for me to work through with being in the third world country, having armed robbers come around the house and living with fear around that. And my father having his spinal cord broken and all of this stuff, which I had to then work through that stuff, which I thought had nothing to do with my adult life. But it had everything to do with it. And there's a lot of people who've gone through all manner of stuff. A lot of people in my community generally have a story, which is why they're attracted to me in some way. And it's recognizing that story makes you strong for sure. But that story, if you don't handle it appropriately, it can be the reason that you don't get the life that you really truly want. The reason that you continue to do everything you do just to get love or to get money. And so you become a prisoner to other people's opinions of you. You become a prisoner to the job, doing something just for money. You become a prisoner to money even. You become a slave to money. But there's a freer way. And that's what I've discovered, and I continue to discover. I'm definitely not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I still have my moments of crazy doubt and fear. And yet I come back to, I know who I am. I know my source. And regardless of what's happening in the physical reality, it's like at the time of this recording, there's all the crazy virus stuff. And it's like, it hasn't really impacted me at all because it's just like, yeah, well, whatever. We just keep moving forward because I know that whatever is happening out there, everything is always working out for my good. And so there's that certainty, that safety, that sureness despite the craziness around me. And that's what people wanting, a feeling of peace despite chaos. Ultimately. So I suppose that's me. That's my story. That's how I got to be me doing what I do, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
What does it look like working with you?
Working with me at the moment is coming into what I call the Abundance Library. I spent a lot of time creating what I call the Abundance Library. It's coming in there to immerse yourself in a different way of thinking, because I have a heck of a lot of programs. I've been creating programs as I learn, as I go deeper with the divine, as I discover things, even in terms of my business and how I've grown it and all of that stuff. I almost like documented into programs, into digital programs, which I used to sell on a one-to-one basis until I felt guided and led to just put them all into a library, because I'm just very prolific. So I was getting to 100 programs, 150 programs that I just create, because I just love to share what's going on inside of me. If someone asks a question, I can program together around it to really go deep into understanding why is this and blah, blah, blah. And so I felt led to just put them all into what I call the Abundance Library. Because the thing I realized as well is immersion is so important for people, because right now we're all immersed in a world that is telling you that either you have to do things you don't want to do for the rest of your life, and that's just the way life is, or that you're just not worth anything and you're just a number, you're just one of 7 billion and it doesn't really matter. Or who knows whatever stories we're all listening to, and we kind of get, school teaches the same thing, everything teaches us the same stuff. And as we're immersed in that, when people like me come and tell you that there's a different way, it almost feels like it's not possible. And so I felt like if people can listen to these things and start to shake some of their ideas, it'll make it easier for them to move into whatever it is that they want to do. So the Abundance Library is the place that I always like people to start. It's immerse themselves in those programs. Just listen to something each day All you need to do is listen, is what I like to say. All you need to do is listen, because that will start you thinking a different way. They start you connecting to the divine in a different way, more empowering way, and forgetting all those crazy ideas that religion may have taught you, or your family may have passed down to you, or who knows what, that just leaves you feeling that the divine is about to punish you or judge you or who knows what. And I do really, truly believe that that relationship is foundational to people's success. And I suppose if you're a spiritual person, I wouldn't even need to tell you that. You just believe that anyway. But yeah, so it's the Abundance Library. And then I work with people a bit more personally within the Deliberate Millionaire Assembly, which is all the programs plus my personal attention in there as part of a group kind of program. That's a great place to be, as well as I can work with people on a one-to-one basis, but that's a very, very small number of people that I work with on a personal basis. But really, because I really do believe people need to start by shaking some of their ideas, because if I work with someone who isn't quite ready to completely move into the next level, it's almost a waste of time. So I need them to be at a place where they recognize that the way you have been thinking, the way you've been immersed in, the environment you've been immersed in is not necessarily the only truth. There is a freer way. And so the Abundance Library, Deliberate Millionaire Assembly are quite accessible ways for people to recognize that there's a different way to live life. And then we decide whether we want to work together in a closer way or not, but the community is really where it's at. So that's how people would work with me at the moment. It's start with the Abundance Library, decide whether you want to come and work with me a bit more personally in the assembly. But yeah, that's me.
Do you have any fun success stories to share?
I've seen clients go from being stuck in there. There was one particular client who was letting agent. I don't know if you guys have them. He rents out other people's properties for them and gets a fee. I don't know what you guys call them, but we call them letting agents. And he'd been hiding in his office in some ways. And in our work together, he learned how to go and give speeches and speak in front of audiences, things that he never thought was possible for him. He opened up a whole different branch of his business and he continues to expand. So that was something that I did with someone there. Offline. But then on an online basis as well, I've had lots of people just kind of coming awake and starting their own businesses, but not just starting a business in something, just make me money, but starting businesses, doing things that they really have always thought they would like to do, but didn't think they could. And then because we did all the clearing work and we did, of course, there's the practical stuff, they found the courage to actually get their businesses off the ground. So I've seen lots of people transition, just like I did, from an unfulfilling job or business to their own fulfilling and highly profitable online business. So that's definitely something that happens quite regularly with the work that I do with people, as well as just going through, because I'm prosperity minister in all areas of life. So sometimes it's the relationship stuff. So I've seen people come out of breakups and move on into more empowering relationships where they feel loved and are able to give love. So it's just a mixture of different things. But those are a few of the things that I've definitely done with people. It's just fun to see people come alive to who they are. I'm not going to pretend it's always easy. The transition can sometimes feel a little bit like, oh my gosh. But we continue to walk through it together and they get through to the other side. So yeah, it's just fulfilling to see.
Awesome. Well, we are coming to the end of our time together, and one thing I like to ask my guests is to do a 1 minute of motivation. You can imagine this as if you have a time machine and you're going back to your 8-year-old self. And you want to convey everything you need to live a happy, joy-filled life, but unfortunately you only have a minute until you're plopped back into the future. Or you can think about it as condensing your entire life's message into a minute. So you ready?
Okay. Prosperity in every single area of your life is your natural state. It is your divine right. All of those dreams you have of writing, of speaking, of singing in front of an audience. Yes, I know your parents told you it's not practical, but I'm telling you right now, please don't let go of that stuff. Do not go and do some stupid pharmacy thing. Basically, just follow through on what your chemistry teacher tells you. Tells you that you should do music stuff. Do it, because that is actually where your true design lies. That's really what you want to do, and you can make it happen. By the time you become older enough, you will find out that actually the internet has come to life and you can do whatever you like on it. And I would say that to everyone. Ultimately, there's so much potential. All the things that you thought that you couldn't do because you thought it was impractical, somebody somewhere is probably doing it. So you may as well give yourself the opportunity to do it. And as you come to do it, you will find that different things come up inside of you that you need to face. Face them so that you can continue to move forward, connect to the divine The divine withholds absolutely nothing from you, regardless of what your crazy church person may have told you once upon a time. It is not true. You are capable of everything you set your mind to. You are powerful beyond measure. Your vision is absolutely your permission, and you can be a deliberate millionaire if you just choose to live life deliberately rather than giving in to the nonsense and your conditioning. You don't have to give in to your conditioning. You can keep your dream alive and actually bring it to life. Just mix the internal work with the external work, and do not listen to anybody who tells you otherwise. Instead, cultivate that relationship with the divine. He will guide you, or she, or it, whatever you consider the divine or higher power to be, will guide you to where you need to go. And it will be glorious. Just stay on your own path. Forget what the world is saying. Stay on your own path. Okay? The end.
Thank you for coming on my podcast. I really enjoyed listening to your story on how you listen to the world around you and try to conform into what lives a happy and joy-filled life. But unfortunately, that didn't fit you, as you needed more. And being able to go through that, especially bankruptcy, something that I went through in my past, and I know that feeling of worthlessness that comes with it. So to be able to take that feeling and expand on it and turn your life around into something else that is more fulfilling, but realizing that was just trying to fit into another box society wanted you to be in, and finally stepping into who you truly are, which is someone to empower other people and shine your light in a way that allows other people to shine their light, is extremely inspiring. So thank you so much for being on my podcast, and thank you so much for everything you do in this world.
Thank you for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, for sure.
May your day be special.
And you too.
And there you have it, folks. That was my interview with Rosemary. Wow, did that not justify my rant at the beginning? I mean, I was almost the complete opposite. Hopefully she was not too upset with me. But I guess it's always being honest with yourself. Another story of somebody who tried to fit into the box, except this time this person actually failed in the box due to the way life treated them, but stepped out of the box and then stepped out of the box again. That's a lot of box stepping out of. I really liked her story about forgiveness. I know this can be controversial, but I feel forgiveness, to not forgive is to, I always like the idea is to drink poison and expect the other person to get sick. But I think if you hold a grudge, you are renting a part of your mind to that person, or you're letting that person your mind rent free, I think is a better way of putting it, because I think it just does more harm. And when you forgive, when you let go, you don't have to forget. You don't have to allow the person back in your life. You don't have to even like them anymore. Just forgive them based on who they were and let go of the bitterness that comes with holding a grudge, because that just hurts you, and try to strive towards being a person who loves people and recognizes the fact that some people are better if they're not in your life, better without any communication whatsoever. Because there are people like that. There are people out there who just don't deserve your time and attention due to the harm that they do to you, but allowing yourself to forgive them will just free you. And that's something I truly believe. Holding grudges doesn't help as long as you move forward. I think that is also the key, because I know some people are afraid to do that because they don't want to be hurt again, but you need to heal yourself to the point where you can recognize the fact that this new person is hurting you, so you can recognize that and get yourself out of there faster this time. One thing I truly do believe, if you don't do the self-work in that regard, you will tend to attract or be attracted to the same people who hurt you that way before. And that's what will get you stuck in holding a grudge, because you will be stuck in not wanting to be hurt that way again, and you feel like you have to hold on to that anger. But when you can love them, but not forget them and not allow them into your life, that allows you to let all that go and make sure it doesn't happen in the future, because you're no longer attracted to that type of person, so you can recognize it faster and get away, or you're just not attracted to that person. And we all know the person who's dated the same person in different clothes or different names and stuff like that. They're pretty much the same. Have one friend who's basically a douchebag magnet, and all their people, basically most of the men they date feel like the same. I couldn't pick them out of a lineup because they all seem like the same person to me. And it's all about doing the self-work to prevent that. So I think forgiveness is very important. I like the way Rosemary mentioned that and everything else. Rosemary, the Abundance Library sounds very interesting. In fact, Rosemary Nonny Knight is very prolific because she's an author of 13 books, and one is the Deliberate Millionaire Freedom Book, Live Wealthy, Healthy, and on Purpose. How to stop living for the weekend and start doing what you want when you want, deliberately. She's giving this away for free, and you can download your digital copy at rosemarynonnyknight.com/free guest. And there you have, folks. That is episode 81 of the Joyous Expansion Podcast. Apologize for being late, but today is April 12th, 6 days since I made my last one, and just feeling overwhelmed at the moment. But that's okay. I'll get over that. It's time for me to work on myself in that regard. So if you want to email me for any reason, you can email me at BRE2Ts, GPR2Es at joyousexpansion.com. You can check out joyousexpansion.com. More episodes at pod.joyousexpansion.com. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, apparently, at Joyous Expansion. But you can also find me on Facebook at Increase Your Joy, because I suck at SEO. If you like this, like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Thank you so much for listening. I love you for who you are. And once again, I'm Brett Dupree, Joyous Expansion Life Coach, champion of authentic joy, and catalyst of transformation for the Church of Awesome, reminding you once again to be love, to be joy, to be awesome. Now play that jingle.
JoyousExpansion.com JoyousExpansion.com Come and say hello to Brett Dupree. He is an inspirational life coach, good for you and good for me. He turned my life from grey to blue, I'm sure he'll do the same for you. Get in touch and you'll see your life will change dramatically. JoyousExpansion.com JoyousExpansion.com